The Texas sun had been brutal all day long, the kind of dry, relentless heat that settles into your bones and reminds you that this land was never meant to be comfortable, only beautiful. By the time the late afternoon shadows began stretching across the parking lot surrounding AT&T Stadium in Arlington, the temperature had barely dipped below 94 degrees, and the asphalt radiated warmth like a skillet left too long on the stove. Bobby Dean Calloway wiped the sweat from the back of his neck with a faded red bandana, the same one he'd carried in his back left pocket for the better part of 30 years, and squinted up at the massive steel and glass structure looming before him. He'd seen it on television 100 times, had watched football games, championship fights, and award shows all broadcast from inside those walls. But standing in front of it, with the crowd already swelling around him like a slow-rising river, Bobby felt something he hadn't felt in a very long time. He felt small, and somehow that felt exactly right. "Daddy, you're doing it again," said the young woman beside him, tugging gently at his sleeve. Bobby looked over at his daughter, Cassidy Calloway, 26 years old, with her mother's dark brown eyes and his own stubborn set to her jaw. She was wearing a white blouse with pearl snap buttons, boots that were broken in just right, and a straw cowboy hat she'd bought at a roadside shop somewhere outside of Abilene. She looked more like her mother every passing year, and some days that made Bobby's chest ache in ways he couldn't quite put words to. "Doing what?" he asked. "Standing there like you're trying to memorize everything," she said, looping her arm through his. "Like you're scared it's gonna disappear." Bobby said nothing for a moment, just looked back up at the stadium. 412 miles they'd driven that morning, leaving the ranch outside of Sweetwater before sunrise. The old truck loaded with a cooler full of sandwiches and 2 thermoses of coffee. The radio tuned to a classic country station the whole way. Cassidy had driven the first stretch, while Bobby dozed with his hat over his face, and then he'd taken over somewhere past Abilene when his nerves wouldn't let him sleep anymore. "Maybe I am," he finally said. Cassidy tightened her arm around his. She didn't push it further. She knew why they were here. She'd always known, even before he told her about the diagnosis, even before the doctor in Abilene had sat them both down in that beige office and talked about surgical risks and recovery timelines and statistics. Cassidy had known for months that her father had been carrying something heavy, and when he'd finally come to her one evening on the porch and said, "I want to see George Strait one more time, just in case," she hadn't argued, hadn't cried, hadn't made it into something dramatic. She just said, "Then let's go." That was Cassidy. Always had been. The crowd around them thickened as they moved toward the main gates, a river of boots and belt buckles and cowboy hats that stretched as far as the eye could see in every direction. Families, couples, groups of friends wearing matching T-shirts with George Strait's face printed on them. Old men with the particular kind of weathered dignity that belongs only to those who've worked with their hands for decades. Young women in sundresses taking photographs of each other. Children perched on fathers' shoulders, wide-eyed at the spectacle. Bobby breathed it all in. The smell of funnel cakes and barbecue drifting from the vendor stands. The distant thrum of a steel guitar from speakers mounted near the gates, playing a George Strait song he recognized instantly. The chair, soft and easy, the notes hanging in the hot Texas air like something sacred. "You remember the first time you heard that song?" he asked Cassidy. She smiled. "You used to play it in the barn, every Saturday morning. You'd have the radio on that old shelf by the horse stalls, and you'd be mucking out and singing along, and you were terrible, Daddy. I want you to know that." Bobby laughed, a real one, the kind that came up from deep in his chest. "Your mother said the same thing. Mama had good ears." "She had good everything," Bobby said. and his voice went quiet at the end of it, the way it always did when he talked about Linda. 3 years gone now, and still her absence was a physical presence on the ranch, in every room, at every table, in the particular silence of Sunday mornings when she used to hum while she made biscuits. They joined the line at Gate B, shuffling forward slowly with the crowd. Bobby reached into the chest pocket of his pearl snap shirt and touched the edge of his ticket, just to make sure it was still there. He'd printed it out at the library in Sweetwater 3 months ago, the day he'd bought it online, and he'd tucked it into the same Bible he kept on his nightstand, between the pages of the Book of Psalms, the way his mother used to keep important papers. 3 rows ahead of Bobby and Cassidy in the same ticket line, a woman stood alone with the particular posture of someone who had learned to take up as little space as possible in a crowd. Diane Holloway was 43 years old, and she had the kind of face that had once been striking, still was, if you caught her in the right light, but which now carried the particular exhaustion of someone who had spent years fighting battles that the world at large had no idea were even being fought. Her dark blonde hair was pulled back, and she wore a simple navy dress and low boots. No hat. She looked slightly out of place among the more elaborately outfitted fans around her, though not in a way that suggested she didn't belong. More in the way of someone who had belonged once and wasn't entirely sure she still did. She worked, or had worked, until 8 months ago, as a music producer and A&R consultant for a mid-sized Nashville label called Ridgeline Records. She'd spent 15 years building a career in the country music industry, signing artists, developing albums, fighting in boardrooms for music she believed in. She'd had moments of genuine success. A platinum album for a young singer-songwriter from Knoxville, a critically praised EP that had earned her enough industry respect to keep her phone ringing for years. And then, slowly and then all at once, it had fallen apart. The label had been acquired by a larger entertainment conglomerate 18 months ago, and the new ownership had brought in their own team. Younger, more data-driven, less interested in the kind of organic artist development that Diane had built her reputation on. She'd been eased out with a polite severance package and the kind of professional courtesy that somehow made the rejection sting more, not less. Since then, she'd done some consulting work, taken a few freelance projects, told herself she was exploring options and taking stock, while the truth was that she had no idea what she wanted anymore. The truth was that she hadn't listened to country music, really listened, for pleasure, for love, in almost 2 years. She'd been listening to it professionally for so long that somewhere along the way, the joy had gotten buried under the spreadsheets and the metrics and the arguments about streaming numbers and demographic targeting. She couldn't remember the last time a song had simply moved her. The ticket for tonight's show had come from her friend Janet Pruitt, who had bought 4 tickets for a group trip from Nashville that had fallen through at the last minute when 2 people canceled and a third got sick. Janet had called Diane on a Tuesday morning and said, "You're going to Texas whether you like it or not," and had emailed the ticket before Diane could argue. Diane had driven down from Nashville alone, listening to podcasts about business and psychology and architecture. Anything but music. She'd checked into a modest hotel in Fort Worth, eaten a room service burger, slept poorly, and told herself this morning while getting dressed that she was just going to go see an old legend perform and get back on the road by midnight. She did not expect anything to happen to her at this concert. She was quite certain of that. Near the back of the vast, churning parking lot, a battered 2019 Honda Civic that had been on its last legs for approximately 2 years longer than anyone would have predicted sat idling in a space far from the stadium, its air conditioning struggling against the Texas heat. Inside it, Luke Patterson was having what could fairly be described as an existential moment. He was 22 years old skinny in the way of young men who forget to eat when they're stressed, with dark hair that needed cutting, and the kind of earnest, slightly overwhelmed expression that suggested he was someone to whom things frequently happened before he'd fully prepared for them. He was wearing jeans, a plain gray t-shirt, and sneakers. The only person within half a mile, he suspected, who was not wearing boots of some kind. Luke had grown up in Austin, which made it both ironic and somehow fitting that he had absolutely no meaningful relationship with country music. His parents were both professors. His father taught comparative literature at UT, his mother taught environmental science, and the household soundtrack of his childhood had been NPR, jazz, and the occasional classical record. Country music had existed to Luke as a vague cultural category, something that happened in the background of certain restaurants and gas stations, background noise for a world he'd never quite inhabited. He had won the tickets 3 weeks ago at a charity raffle for the animal shelter where he volunteered on weekends. 2 tickets, front floor section. He'd been meaning to take his roommate, Chris Alvarez, but Chris had landed a last-minute photography gig in New Mexico and had told Luke to find someone else or go alone. Luke had texted 7 people over the course of a week. All 7 had been busy, uninterested, or both. So here he was, alone, in a parking lot in Arlington, holding a ticket to see someone whose music he could not have named a single song of 2 hours ago. He had, in a brief panic on the drive up from Austin, asked his car's voice assistant to play George Strait Greatest Hits, and had listened with a kind of bewildered attention to 30 minutes of music that was cleaner and more emotionally direct than anything he'd expected. There was something in it, he couldn't quite put his finger on what, that felt old in the way that certain true things feel old, unpretentious, unafraid of being sincere. He'd turned it off before he could feel too much about it, and switched back to a podcast. But the melodies had lodged somewhere in the back of his mind, and they were still there now as he sat in the parking lot, building up the social courage to get out of the car and walk into a stadium full of people who all appeared to belong here far more than he did. His phone buzzed. A text from Chris. "How's Cowboy World?" Luke typed back. "I'm still in the parking lot." 3 dots appeared, then Luke. Get out of the car. He stared at the message for a moment. Then he pocketed his phone, turned off the engine, and got out of the car. The heat hit him like a wall. Above the stadium, the Texas sky was turning the particular shade of deep gold that happens only in the half hour before sunset, when the light gets long and the whole world looks like it's been dipped in something warm. Luke stood beside his car for a moment and looked at it. Despite everything, despite the nerves, despite the sneakers, despite the absolute certainty that he did not belong here, something in that sky made him feel, for just a second, like maybe tonight was going to be okay. He started walking. Inside the stadium, in the deep corridors beneath the main floor, a different kind of tension was building. Ray Denton, 48, had been George Strait's production manager for 11 years, and in those 11 years, he had learned to distinguish between the kinds of pre-show energy that were normal and the kinds that were not. Normal was the controlled chaos of a crew setting up lights and checking sound systems, the smell of coffee and equipment cases, the low hum of 200 people working in practiced coordination. Normal was the particular tightly wound focus that settled over everything in the 2 hours before showtime. What was happening tonight was not entirely normal. Ray stood in the corridor outside the main production office, his head set around his neck, and a clipboard he hadn't looked at in 20 minutes in his left hand, and spoke in a low, firm voice into his phone. "What do you mean? The second monitor array is reading inconsistent. We checked it this morning. We checked it this afternoon. I personally watched Derek Walsh run the diagnostic twice. On the other end of the line, the sound engineer's voice came back taut and professional. "I know, Ray. I don't know what happened. We're running it again right now. It may be nothing. It may be a calibration drift from the temperature change." The temperature change. The stadium cooled about 14 degrees in the last 2 hours when they turned the full HVAC on. Equipment settles. It happens. Ray closed his eyes briefly. "What's the timeline to confirm?" 20 minutes, maybe 30. "We have 90 minutes to showtime. 30 minutes is fine, but I need confirmation." "You'll have it." He ended the call and stood for a moment in the corridor, breathing evenly. In 11 years with George Strait's operation, Ray had learned that almost everything that could go wrong before a show could be fixed, given time and the right people. The crew he had tonight was the best he'd ever worked with. He trusted them completely. What he hadn't told the sound engineer, what he hadn't told anyone yet, was that tonight's show had an additional layer of complexity that almost nobody in the building knew about. Not the crew, not the venue management, not the thousands of people filing into their seats upstairs. In a private green room, 2 corridors down, sitting on a comfortable sofa with a cup of chamomile tea and her own small team of 3 people, was Dolly Parton. She had flown in that afternoon from Nashville on a private charter, arrived at the stadium through a loading entrance on the east side, and been escorted to her room without a single person in the general staff area seeing her. The guest appearance had been in planning for 6 weeks, coordinated through a tiny circle of trusted people on both sides. It was, by every intention, going to be a complete surprise. Ray had been managing that secret for 6 weeks. He had not told his wife. He had not told his assistant. He had fielded approximately 400 logistics questions from approximately 8 different people, and had given each of them only the precise amount of information they needed to do their job, and nothing more. He was proud of how watertight it had been. He was also now less than 90 minutes from the moment when the secret would either hold or fall apart, and his nerves were beginning to express opinions about that fact. He rolled his shoulders, put his headset back on, and started walking toward the sound booth. Bobby and Cassidy found their seats in section 114, 15 rows from the floor, close enough that the stage felt enormous and immediate. Bobby sat down, placed his hat on his knee, and looked out at the stage. A massive structure of steel and lights, the band's equipment set up and waiting, the screen behind it dark for now, the floor below already packed with fans pressed together in a warm, anticipatory mass. "Good seats," Cassidy said. "Best I could get," Bobby said. He'd paid more for them than he'd told her. More than he'd told himself was reasonable, really. But there had been something in him when he was buying them on that library computer in Sweetwater that had said, "This might be the last time. Don't be cheap about the last time." He reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a small photograph, worn soft at the edges from handling. Linda, 30 years ago, standing in front of their first truck with her arms crossed, and a smile she could never quite hold back. He looked at it for a moment, then tucked it back. "She'd have loved this," he said quietly. Cassidy put her hand over his. "She would have cried through every single song," she said, and then denied it. Bobby smiled. "Yeah, she would have." Around them, the stadium filled. The roar of the crowd grew like weather, like something atmospheric, building pressure in the air. The lights above began their slow pre-show cycle, and the anticipation that had been simmering all day in Bobby's chest rose to something closer to awe. He was here. He had made it. Whatever happened next, the surgery, the recovery, the uncertain arithmetic of what came after, he had made it here. And for tonight, that was enough. Luke found his seat on the floor section with 10 minutes to spare. and immediately understood that he had seriously underestimated what he was walking into. The energy inside AT&T Stadium was unlike anything he'd experienced at the handful of concerts he'd attended in his life. A few indie shows in Austin clubs, one large outdoor music festival where he'd mostly felt anxious about losing his friends in the crowd. This was different in kind, not just degree. There was a unity to it. All these people, tens of thousands of them, were here for the same specific thing, and they all knew every word of what was coming, and they all felt the same way about it. Luke could feel it in the air, in the way people around him talked to each other, strangers finding immediate common ground in shared love for the same songs, the same artist, the same particular strand of American music. The man beside him, late 60s, enormous silver belt buckle, a smile that suggested he'd been waiting for this all year, looked over at Luke's sneakers, and then at his face, and then grinned without a trace of judgment. "First George Strait show?" he asked. Luke blinked. "Is it that obvious?" The man laughed. "Son, it's written all over you. But I'll tell you something." He leaned slightly in. "First George Strait show is something you'll remember the rest of your life. I've seen him 31 times, and the first one is still the one I dream about." He stuck out his hand. "Walt Freeman. Luke Patterson. You're gonna be fine, Luke Patterson," Walt Freeman said, and settled back in his seat with the absolute contentment of a man exactly where he belongs. Luke looked at the stage. The lights shifted. Somewhere in the distance, a roar began building, rolling forward through the crowd like a wave. He felt the hair on his arms stand up. The green room in the sub-level of AT&T Stadium was a well-appointed space that the venue reserved for its highest-profile guests, a long sofa in soft leather, a coffee table with a fruit and cheese arrangement nobody had touched, a mounted television currently showing a muted local news broadcast, and walls bare enough to feel temporary, which they were. It was a room designed to be occupied briefly by extraordinary people on their way to something larger. Dolly Parton sat on the sofa with her legs crossed and her tea balanced on one knee. And she was reading something on her phone with the focused attention of a person who refuses to let downtime go to waste. At 67, though she would be quick to remind anyone who brought up age that she considered it a deeply personal matter and wasn't inclined to discuss it in practical terms, she carried herself with the particular ease of someone who had long ago made peace with who she was and how she took up space in the world. Her stage outfit for tonight was already on, a fitted ivory ensemble that managed to be both classic and unmistakably her, with the kind of embroidery and detail that announced itself without shouting. Her hair was immaculate. Her team, a makeup artist named Gwen Alvarado, her personal assistant Renata Cole, and her tour manager Phil Bauer, moved around the room with practiced quiet. "Phil," Dolly said, without looking up from her phone. Phil Bauer, 52, compact and efficiently built, looked up from his own clipboard. "Yes? Did George's people confirm the walk-on cue? Third song after the intermission break. Ray's team will signal us when the set change is happening. You'll have 4 minutes from signal to wings." 4 minutes is plenty. She scrolled something on her phone. "And the monitor situation?" Phil paused almost imperceptibly. "They're working on it." Now, Dolly looked up. She had very clear blue eyes that missed very little. "What does working on it mean, Phil?" "It means there was a calibration issue with the secondary monitor array, and the sound team is resolving it. Ray Denton says it'll be confirmed within the next 20 minutes. It's not a structural problem. It's a temperature issue." Dolly considered this for a moment. Then she said, "Honey, I have performed in a barn in Tennessee in July with one monitor, a borrowed microphone, and a sound system held together with electrical tape. I'll be fine." Gwen Alvarado, from across the room, smiled without looking up from what she was doing. "I know you will," Phil said. "I just wanted you to know." Dolly went back to her phone. Then she put it down entirely and looked at the ceiling for a moment, in the way of someone accessing something interior. "You know what I love about this?" she said, to no particular person. "Tell us," Renata said, from where she was organizing a small table of personal items near the door. "The surprise," Dolly said. "All those people up there, they have no idea. They came to see George, which is the right reason to come, he's magnificent. But they don't know yet. And in a couple of hours, they will. And for the rest of their lives, when they tell this story, they'll remember exactly where they were standing and what it felt like when they first saw me walk out." She paused. "I love that. I love being the thing that turns an already great night into the night they never forget." Nobody in the room said anything for a moment, because there was nothing to add to that. "All right," Dolly said, picking up her tea. "Let's make sure this monitor gets fixed." 2 corridors away, in the main production office, Ray Denton was managing 6 things simultaneously. The monitor issue had been resolved. Derek Walsh had called in 15 minutes ahead of schedule with a clean confirmation. And the relief Ray felt about that was immediate and physical, a loosening in his chest and shoulders. That was handled. Moving on. The other 5 things were the standard orchestral chaos of a major production at the 2 hours to showtime mark. A catering mix-up that had sent the wrong dinner to the guitar tech area. A lighting console operator who'd arrived 20 minutes late from a hotel on the wrong side of Fort Worth. A request from the venue's marketing team to place an additional camera position that Ray had been saying no to for 3 days and would continue saying no to. A question about the set list that Ray had already answered twice and would apparently need to answer a 3rd time. And a phone call from a journalist at a Dallas entertainment outlet who had somehow gotten the main production line number and was asking if there was any truth to rumors about a special guest tonight. Ray had handled that last one with the most practiced version of a non-answer he possessed. Every George Strait show is a special event. I can tell you that much. And I think fans tonight are going to have a remarkable experience. And had ended the call quickly and passed the number to the venue's media team to deal with. The secret, as far as he could tell, was still intact. He was standing in the corridor reviewing the final lighting cues when a voice beside him said, "You look like you're calculating the airspeed of a satellite." Ray turned. Caroline Briggs, 41, the show's stage manager, stood beside him with 2 cups of coffee, one of which she held out. She had short-cropped dark hair, a headset around her neck, and the sort of expressive face that communicated 17 things per square inch. She'd worked with Ray for 4 years and was one of roughly 7 people on the entire production who knew about Dolly. "I'm calculating whether I'm going to survive the next 2 hours," Ray said, taking the coffee. "You will," Caroline said. "Probably." Very reassuring. She stood beside him, looking at the corridor. Monitor situation. Resolved. Camera request from marketing? Denied, for the 4th and final time. Dolly's team good? Good. She's ready. Phil confirmed the walk-on cue. Caroline nodded. She sipped her coffee. "You know what the funny thing is?" she said. "All of this, all the planning, the logistics, the 6 weeks of secrets and cues and contingency planning, and in about 2 hours, none of it is going to matter to a single person in that stadium. All they're going to know is that it happened." Ray thought about that. That's either the most comforting thing you could say, or the most annoying. "Both," Caroline said pleasantly. "That's management." In section 114, Bobby Dean Calloway had been quiet for several minutes, watching the floor crowd below with an expression that Cassidy recognized and didn't interrupt. It was the look he got when something was working on him from the inside. when the feelings were moving around trying to find the right arrangement before he could put words to them. She ordered 2 beers from a vendor working the aisle. She needed one, and she figured her father did too, though he'd never asked, and settled back in her seat, watching the stage with her own private thoughts. The truth was that Cassidy Calloway was scared, not in the acute, immediate way. She was not prone to panic, had inherited enough of her father's practical stoicism to keep herself functional under pressure, but in the deep, slow, constant way that had been living in her chest for 4 months, ever since the diagnosis. Aortic stenosis, the cardiologist had said. Serious but treatable, with surgery. Good odds for someone in Bobby's overall condition. Better than even odds, the doctor had said carefully, that the surgery would give him another 10, 15, maybe 20 years with normal activity. Better than even. Cassidy had turned that phrase over in her mind approximately 40,000 times since she'd heard it. Better than even. More likely than not. She was a practical woman who dealt in concrete realities, and she understood what the phrase meant in both its optimistic and its cautionary readings. And she held both of those readings in her mind at the same time, every day, like carrying 2 fragile things simultaneously. She handed her father his beer. He took it with a nod. "Thank you, sweetheart." "Don't thank me. You're paying." He laughed softly. "Fair enough." The lights in the stadium had gone to their full pre-show setting now, a warm gold wash across the floor and lower levels. The stage lights cycling slowly through deep blues and reds, the massive screens on either side of the stage running a slow montage of Texas landscapes. The crowd noise had risen to something physical, a pressure in the ears, a collective breathing in that signaled the moment was almost here. Bobby leaned forward slightly, forearms on his knees, hands wrapped around his beer. His eyes were fixed on the stage. "Daddy?" Cassidy said. "Yeah. I'm glad we came." He turned to look at her. There was something in his eyes that she didn't see often. Something open, without the usual layer of Texas man restraint over it. "Me too, baby," he said. "Me too." On the floor, Luke Patterson was standing because everyone around him was standing, and also because standing felt right. Felt like the appropriate physical response to the energy that was now building in the stadium like electricity before a storm. Walt Freeman beside him was already whooping, and Luke found himself, against all odds, beginning to feel something in his chest that he might, if pressed, have described as excitement. He thought about the drive up, and the 30 minutes of George Strait he'd listened to in the car, and the song that had hit him sideways in a way he hadn't expected. Something about a chair, a deliberate misunderstanding between 2 people in a bar, flirtatious and warm, and somehow completely confident in its own smallness. There had been a line in it that had lodged in his brain, "I don't think I've ever seen you here before." Something about the way it was sung, no performance, no strain, just the clean delivery of a true thing, had made Luke feel, for a strange brief moment, like he was being let in on something. He had no framework for what country music meant to the people around him. He'd grown up in a house where music was discussed analytically, where the language around songs was the language of craft and theory and cultural context. He'd never understood, quite, how music could be home to someone. How a song could be a place. He was beginning to, now. The lights dropped. The crowd exploded. And George Strait walked onto the stage. The roar that went up when George Strait appeared at the top of the stage ramp was not like other concert roars. Luke had been to enough events, basketball games, festivals, a college graduation where someone famous spoke, to have a reference point for crowd noise. But this was different. This was not the sound of excitement alone. It was the sound of love, specific and long-held, the kind that has been waiting patiently for this exact moment. He was 60-something, dressed simply, dark jeans, a pressed Western shirt, his signature white cowboy hat, and he walked to the microphone with the unhurried ease of a man who has never once in his life felt the need to rush toward applause. He didn't play to it. He didn't amplify it. He just stood there for a moment, let it wash over him, smiled a smile that was genuine and private, and somehow communicated to every single person in the stadium that he was glad to see them. Then the band hit the opening notes of Ace in the Hole, and 45,000 people lost their minds. Bobby Dean Calloway was on his feet before the first note resolved. Cassidy was beside him, both hands raised, singing the first line at full volume without a moment's self-consciousness. And Bobby was singing too. Badly, she'd been right about that, always had been, but loud and real, and with everything he had. He hadn't felt his body in a while, not in the way he felt it now. The diagnosis had done something strange to his physical awareness, had made him hyper-conscious of his heart as a mechanical object, a pump with a flawed valve, a thing that could be repaired or could fail. He'd been carrying that awareness for 4 months, and somewhere in that carrying, he'd lost the simple animal sense of inhabiting his own body without thinking about it. Standing in section 114 with this song rolling over him like a warm front, Bobby Dean Calloway felt his body again, felt his lungs filling and his voice rising and his feet planted on the concrete floor. And it was the most alive he'd felt since the morning the doctor had said the word that changed the sound of everything. He sang every word. Song after song, George Strait moved through the set with the ease of someone walking through their own house in the dark. Every step known, every turn anticipated, nothing wasted. The chair, easy come, easy go. All my exes live in Texas. The crowd knew everyone. Every single one. By the third song, Luke Patterson had stopped feeling out of place and had started feeling something else entirely. A kind of awed participation, like stumbling into a ceremony and finding that you know instinctively how to hold yourself in it. Walt Freeman had taken it upon himself, between songs, to lean over and provide brief histories. That one went #1 in '84. And he wrote this one on the road between Shreveport and Dallas. And Luke found himself absorbing each piece of information with genuine hunger, adding it to the growing internal map he was building of this music and why it mattered. Does he always play this many songs? Luke asked during a brief pause between tracks. Walt looked at him with an expression of fond incredulity. Son, George Strait has 60 #1 singles. The man could play for 3 days and still have material left over. 60? 60. Luke looked at the stage. 60 #1 singles. He tried to contextualize that and found he couldn't. Not really. It was a number that existed in a category by itself. A statistical outlier so extreme it had become a kind of mythology. Backstage, Ray Denton had settled into the focused calm that always came over him once a show was actually running. The tension of preparation dissolved into the clean concentration of execution, and he moved through the wings and corridors with the quiet efficiency of long practice, monitoring the production through his headset with one ear and the ambient sound of the show with the other. He checked in with Caroline at the stage manager's station. "How's the floor sound?" "Perfect," Caroline said. Derek's call on the recalibration was right. "It's clean." "House mix?" "Sitting exactly where it should be." Ray nodded. He looked at the show schedule on his clipboard. They were 22 minutes in. The set was running on time. The intermission was 40 minutes out. He walked the long corridor to the east wing, past the loading bays, to the green room where Dolly Parton was waiting. She was standing now, doing a series of quiet vocal warm-ups, her voice moving through gentle scales in the low-ceilinged room. Gwen Alvarado had done a final touch-up on her makeup. Renata Cole stood near the door with a phone in hand and a look of prepared attentiveness. Ray knocked lightly on the open door frame. Dolly finished her scale, smiled. "Ray Denton," she said. "How we doing?" "We're doing great," he said. "Show's running clean. Sound is solid. We're 40 minutes from your walk-on." "Wonderful." She rolled her shoulders back lightly. "How's George? He know I'm here?" "He's known since this morning. He didn't say much about it." Dolly smiled. "George doesn't say much about most things. That's why his songs do all the talking." She paused. "He happy, though? You could tell?" Ray thought about it. He smiled differently this morning than he usually does before a show. Quieter. More like he searched for the word. "Moved," Dolly said. "Yeah, more like moved." She nodded, satisfied. "Good. That's what we want." Intermission arrived like a held breath releasing. The house lights rose halfway, and the floor crowd shifted and stretched. And in section 114, Bobby Dean Calloway sat down slowly and let the silence, relative silence, the roar of 45,000 people talking, which sounded like silence after what had just been, settle around him. He realized he was crying. Not obviously, not the kind of crying that makes a scene, but there were tears on his face, 2 of them, and he didn't bother wiping them away immediately. Cassidy saw them and said nothing, just rested her head briefly against his shoulder, which was the right response, which was the Linda response. And Bobby thought once again that his daughter was more her mother than she'd ever know. 23 years, Bobby said. "Since you last saw him? Since the last time. Your mama and I drove up from Sweetwater. We had you in the back seat, asleep in your car seat. You were 3 years old." He shook his head slowly. "She cried through the whole show. I told you." "You did," Cassidy said. "And here I am." He touched his face with the back of his hand, finally. Smiled at himself a little. "Took after her, I guess." Cassidy lifted her head and looked at him directly. "I think," she said carefully, "that you have always been softer than you've let anyone see. And I think that's one of the things about you that I love most. And I want you to know that." Bobby looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked back at the stage, where the crew was moving quietly in the low lights, rearranging something he couldn't make out from this distance. "You're going to make me cry again," he said. "Then cry," Cassidy said simply. "Nobody here's going to judge you for it." Luke Patterson bought a beer at intermission and stood near the side of the floor section, watching the crowd. He was in a particular state that he recognized from certain late-night conversations in his college dorm, from the occasional book that arrived at exactly the right time, a state of unexpected opening, where something that had been closed in him was now admitting light from a direction he hadn't anticipated. He called Chris. "Are you still in the parking lot?" Chris asked immediately. "I'm in the show," Luke said. "Listen." "Oh my God, you're actually there." "Chris, I don't know how to explain it. It's like everyone in this building knows something I don't, and they're all sharing it at the same time. And I keep feeling like I'm just about to figure out what it is." There was a pause. Then Chris, who was a photographer and thought in images, said, "That sounds like the feeling of being inside a tradition for the first time." Luke considered that. "Yeah," he said. "That's exactly what it is." "So, what are you going to do about it?" Luke looked at the stage. "Keep listening," he said. "Good answer," said Chris. The second half of the show opened with the firemen, and the crowd answered it with the same total, full-throated love they'd given everything else. George Strait moved through 3 more songs, each one landing like a stone in still water, the ripples moving outward through 45,000 people simultaneously. Ray Denton stood in the wings, watching the stage, his headset connecting him to Caroline at the stage manager's station and to Phil Bauer in the East Corridor, where Dolly's team was positioned and ready. He looked at the set list. One more song, then the transition. His heart was doing something unusual. After 11 years in production management, his pulse during a show was usually absolutely stable, a professional heartbeat, trained out of its emotional responses by sheer repetition. But tonight, in these last 2 minutes before the moment, he felt it. A genuine quickening. The particular electricity of being the person who knows what's about to happen to 45,000 people who don't. George Strait finished the song. He stepped back from the microphone. The crowd roared. He smiled that quiet, specific smile. Then he stepped back to the microphone and said, in that unhurried Texas voice, "You know, I've been doing this a long time. And every now and then, on a really special night, the universe decides to give you something extra." The crowd quieted. Not to silence. There were still layers of anticipation, of processing, of wondering, but to attention. 45,000 people listening. "I've got a friend who's been a part of country music longer than most of us have been alive," George Strait said. "She's a legend, she's a treasure, and she's here tonight in Texas." He paused just for a beat. "Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Dolly Parton." For a half second, maybe less, the stadium was absolutely still. Then the East Wing curtain opened. And then the sound happened. It was not a roar. It was something more than a roar. It was the sound of recognition, of love confirmed, of a beautiful surprise arriving at the exact right moment. All of those things simultaneously, amplified by 45,000 human throats and the acoustics of one of the largest indoor venues in the world. And it hit every person in AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas, like a physical force. Bobby Dean Calloway grabbed Cassidy's arm, not because he was unsteady, because he needed to hold on to something real, something that confirmed that this was actually happening, and not some magnificent construction of his hope-strained brain. He had not expected this. He could not have expected this. He stared at the stage, at the unmistakable figure walking towards center stage in ivory and embroidery, with her hair perfect, and her smile so enormous it seemed to arrive before she did. And he felt something break open in his chest in the most painless, most welcome way imaginable. "That's," he started. "That's Dolly Parton," Cassidy said, and her voice had gone completely undone. Bobby looked at his daughter. She was crying, fully, openly, with no attempt to manage it. And she looked so much like her mother in that moment that Bobby's breath left him entirely. He put his arm around her, and she leaned into him, and they stood there together in section 1 to 14, 15 rows from the floor, while Dolly Parton walked to the center of a stage in Texas, and the world became something larger than it had been 30 seconds ago. On the floor, Luke Patterson felt the sound before he processed what it was. Felt it in his chest, in the soles of his feet on the concrete floor, in the air itself. Then he saw her, and the pieces connected, and he stood with his mouth open for a full 3 seconds before Walt Freeman grabbed his shoulder. "That," Walt Freeman said, with the absolute conviction of a man for whom this moment was the confirmation of something he'd believed all along, "is something you'll tell your grandchildren." Luke couldn't speak. He watched Dolly Parton walk to the microphone, watched her exchange a smile with George Strait, a private, warm, decades-deep smile that was visible even from the floor, and felt something shift in him permanently. He didn't have the language for it yet. He was 22 years old, and had grown up with a different map of what music could be. And this was a territory he hadn't known existed until tonight. But something in him understood, with the certainty that requires no vocabulary, that he was witnessing something that would reorganize the way he thought about music, about community, about the particular kind of beauty that lives in things passed down and held in common by many hands over many years. They opened with Islands in the Stream. The song hit the stadium like sunlight hitting water. Sudden, warm, everywhere at once. The crowd didn't just sing along. They became the song, every voice joining until the distinction between performance and audience collapsed entirely. Until it was not George Strait and Dolly Parton performing for 45,000 people, but 60-some thousand voices, counting the two on stage, making something together. Bobby Dean Calloway sang every word. He had not thought of himself as someone who sang in public, had spent most of his adult life as a man of few words and quiet gestures, the kind of man who expressed love through work, through showing up, through being reliably present. But in this moment, in this stadium, with his daughter's head against his shoulder and this song wrapping around him like a blanket he'd known all his life, he sang without reservation and without shame, and it felt like the most natural thing he'd ever done. Cassidy sang beside him. She knew every word, same as he did. She'd grown up hearing this song, grown up with it woven into Saturday mornings and long drives, and every occasion where her parents had been in the same room with a radio. It was not a song she thought about consciously. It was part of the architecture of her childhood, part of the structural material of who she was. Hearing it now, in this context, with everything that had been weighing on her for the past 4 months, it arrived like something she hadn't known she needed. She let herself cry properly. She stopped managing it, stopped being the practical one, stopped calculating odds. She just sang and cried and held her father's arm and let the music do what music does when you finally stop protecting yourself from it. Dolly's voice, live and unmediated, was something that the recordings never quite captured. There was a warmth to it, a presence, something physical in the air around the microphone that came through the monitors and the house speakers and arrived in the chest before it arrived in the ears. She sang with the ease of someone for whom singing is as natural as breathing, with the particular pleasure of a performer who genuinely loves what she's doing. And that pleasure was visible in every line, in the way she moved, in the moments between verses when she looked out at the crowd with an expression of open, unguarded joy. George Strait beside her was the yin to that yang, quieter, more contained. His voice as clean and direct as it had been on every record, every show, every year for the past 4 decades. Together, they had a chemistry that was old and easy. The chemistry of mutual deep respect between two people who have spent their lives in the same world and come to it from different doors. They played Jolene next, Dolly alone on that one, stepping forward while the band dropped to a minimal arrangement. And what happened in the stadium during Jolene was perhaps the purest expression of everything that had been building all night. 45,000 people singing Jolene. Not humming along, not murmuring the words, singing it. Every syllable, every repetition of that pleading, desperate name, every rise and fall of that melody, with the kind of unself-conscious collective voice that happens only when a song has been absorbed so deeply into a culture that it no longer belongs to one person. It belongs to everyone who has ever heard it and felt it land. Luke Patterson sang it. He didn't know all the words, had to follow the rhythm and fill in the gaps, but he sang what he knew and felt the shape of the rest. And beside him, Walt Freeman sang with his hands clasped in front of him like a man in church, which, in every way that mattered, he was. In the wings, Ray Denton had stopped consulting his clipboard. He was just watching. Caroline stood beside him, and she had her arms crossed and her chin lifted slightly, and there were tears on her face that she wasn't doing anything about. 11 years, Ray said quietly. I know, Caroline said. I've never... He stopped. I know, she said again. They stood there in the wings and watched Dolly Parton sing Jolene to the state of Texas, and neither of them said another word. Backstage, after Jolene, during the brief transition to the next song, Dolly stepped to the edge of the wings for a moment of water and breath. Ray was there with a bottle and a towel. She took the water, drank, looked out at the edge of the floor visible from the wing, the sea of faces, the raised phones recording, the particular quality of attention that characterized a crowd in the grip of something genuinely moving. How do they look? She asked. Like they can't believe it's real, Ray said. She smiled. That's my favorite look. She handed back the water. George's people ready for the next one? Ready. Good. She adjusted a small detail of her outfit, almost without thinking. You know what the best part of a surprise is? It's not the moment it happens. The best part is the story they get to tell afterward. She looked at the crowd one more time. Every single person in that building is going to go home and tell someone about tonight. And every time they tell it, it's going to feel just like this. She walked back out onto the stage. The crowd detonated again. They played 4 more songs together. He Stopped Loving Her Today, reimagined as a duet that nobody had ever heard done that way, with Dolly taking the female perspective in an interpolated verse that the crowd greeted with the specific joy of hearing something beloved made new. I Will Always Love You, which Dolly had written and which she sang here in its country original arrangement, simpler and more heartbreaking than any version that had come after. And then, as the set began its move toward something final, a medley of verses from songs that spanned their combined careers, woven together by the band in a continuous thread of melody. During I Will Always Love You, Bobby Dean Calloway sat down. He sat down not because he was tired or weak, but because the weight of the moment required sitting, required stillness, required being low and grounded, close to the earth in the way that grief and gratitude both sometimes call for. He sat with his elbows on his knees and his face in his hands for part of it, not hiding, just receiving, just letting the song move through him. Linda, the 23 years since the last time, the surgery that was coming, and whatever came after, the ranch in Sweetwater, where every room still held her shape, Cassidy, with her mother's eyes and his stubbornness, and a love for him that she expressed in the practical, steady, wordless way that good people love the people they're afraid of losing. The song asked nothing of him. It only offered what it had always offered, the particular grace of a feeling so universally true that hearing it shared by a voice this clear, in a room this vast, made you feel less alone in the deepest, most private territory of being human. When the song ended, Bobby lifted his face. Cassidy was looking at him. He took her hand. I'm going to be okay, he said. He had not said that yet. Not once. In 4 months. He hadn't been sure enough to say it. But something in the architecture of this night, the 400 miles, the seat in section 114, the friend he'd made of his own fear by bringing it here and watching it dissolve in the sound of 45,000 people singing, had shifted something in him to a place where the words were possible. I know, Cassidy said. She squeezed his hand. I know you are. George Strait came back to the microphone alone for the closing stretch of the show, and the crowd received him with a warmth that had been deepened by everything that had preceded it. Dolly stood to his left, not exiting, not stepping back into the wings, but remaining on stage, visible and present. An acknowledgement that tonight was not a normal show, and the normal rules of structure didn't entirely apply. He played Carrying Your Love With Me. He played Oceanfront Property. He played Run. Each song arrived with its full weight of history, of familiarity, of the particular emotional specificity that belongs to songs people have been listening to for 20 or 30 years. Songs that have been present at important moments, that have been on the radio during drives home after hard days, that have played at weddings and funerals, and on quiet Tuesday mornings in barns in the Texas Panhandle. Bobby Dean Calloway sang all of them. His voice was not good, had never been good, probably never would be, but it was loud and true and full of everything, and it sat comfortably in the great collective voice of the room, which forgave all individual shortcomings and made something beautiful out of their sum. Cassidy sang beside him. She'd stopped crying and entered a state she didn't have an exact word for. Open, attentive, fully present in a way that she realized she hadn't been in months, maybe longer. The constant background calculation, the managing of risk, the processing and reprocessing of medical probabilities, all of it had gone quiet in a way that she knew was temporary, but which felt, for now, like a gift. She thought about her mother, not the sad thoughts. Those had come and gone during the show, had moved through her and passed. What she thought about now was the specific joy her mother had taken in music, the way Linda Calloway had understood, instinctively and without needing to analyze it, that music was not background, but foreground, that it was one of the things life was actually made of, one of the materials. Cassidy had been so busy being the practical one, the capable one, the one who researched surgical centers and read medical studies and coordinated appointments, that she had forgotten, for a while, to let music in. Sitting here now, in the sound of this show, she understood that the forgetting had been a kind of self-protection, that feeling things fully required a certain kind of safety, and that she had been too afraid for too long to feel things fully. She let herself feel it now. For Luke Patterson, the closing stretch of the show was a series of discoveries. Each song was new to him, new as a specific recorded thing. Though by now some of the melodies had a familiarity that suggested they'd always been somewhere in his peripheral cultural hearing. And he received each one with the particular attention of someone encountering something significant for the first time, wanting to register everything. But more than the specific songs, what he was receiving was something harder to name. It was the experience of being inside a tradition. Walt Freeman had given him that phrase, and it had settled in him as accurate, and discovering that traditions are not closed, not exclusive, not hostile to newcomers. They are, at their best, exactly the opposite. They are an invitation, a hand extended backward through time, reaching for the next person who needs what this particular strand of human experience can offer. He had come to this stadium in sneakers, knowing nothing, certain he didn't belong. He was leaving. He could already feel this, as someone to whom country music now meant something. Not the same something it meant to Bobby Dean Calloway, to Cassidy, to Walt Freeman with his 31 shows and his silver belt buckle and his absolute certainty about where he belonged in the world, but something real, something earned over the course of a single extraordinary night, which is, perhaps, exactly how these things are supposed to begin. He thought about his father, the literature professor, who had once told him in the context of a completely different conversation that the best stories are not the ones that tell you something you didn't know, but the ones that name something you already felt without knowing you felt it. Luke hadn't understood that fully at the time. He understood it now. Every song he'd heard tonight had been doing exactly that, arriving at something already present in him, something human and common and wordless, and giving it a shape he could hold. Walt Freeman leaned over during a brief pause. "You doing okay, son?" Luke looked at him. "Yeah," he said. "I think I'm really good, actually." Walt nodded, satisfied. "Told you," he said. In the wings, Ray Denton allowed himself, for the first time all night, to simply stand still and listen. The show was running perfectly. Caroline had everything in hand. The crew was executing flawlessly. There was nothing left for him to manage, not for the next few minutes. And so he stood at the edge of the wing with his clipboard at his side and his headset on, but quiet. And he listened. He was thinking about his daughter, 11 years old, at home in Nashville with her mother, who had texted him at intermission. "How's the show?" He'd texted back, "Unbelievable." She'd sent a heart emoji and nothing else, which was the right response. His daughter had started taking guitar lessons 8 months ago. She was not, at this point, particularly accomplished, but she practiced every evening after dinner with a focus and patience that had surprised him. Surprised him because he'd expected her to want quick results, to grow frustrated with the slow mechanics of learning an instrument. And instead, she had simply sat with it, had let the difficulty be difficult without letting it discourage her, had moved through it with a kind of faith. He'd asked her once what she liked about it. She'd thought for a moment and then said, "When you play a song that someone else already knows, it's like you're both in the same place, even if you're in different rooms." Standing in the wing of AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas, listening to 45,000 people singing along with George Strait, Ray Denton thought about his daughter's answer and understood it more completely than he had the first time. He wiped his eyes quickly, professionally, and went back to watching the stage. George Strait paused before the final song. He stood at the microphone and looked out at the crowd for a long moment, not performing the look, not stage managing it, just actually looking, the way a person looks at something they love and want to remember. He had been doing this for 40 years, had played venues like this, and venues a tenth this size, had played when country music was everywhere and when it was considered passé, and when it came back around again, had watched the industry change in ways that would have been unimaginable to the young man from Poteet, Texas, who'd first walked onto a stage with a guitar and a song and a particular way of meaning what he sang. He had outlasted trends and fashions and industry cycles. He had not done it by chasing anything. He had done it by staying completely, stubbornly, faithfully himself, by believing that the music he loved, played with honesty and precision and respect for the people who came to hear it, would always find its people. And here they were, his people, all of them, the old ones and the young ones, the ones who'd been there from the beginning and the ones discovering it tonight for the very first time. All of them here, in this room, because something in this music had reached them where they actually lived. "One more," he said. The crowd knew what was coming before the first chord. The Cowboy Rides Away. The song began with a single guitar line, clean and unhurried, and the crowd answered it with a sound that was different from everything that had come before. Quieter in some registers, deeper in others. A sound that contained something elegiac alongside the celebration. Something about time passing and love enduring and the particular bittersweet weight of last songs, final curtains, nights this good that cannot be held. Bobby Dean Calloway stood with his arm around his daughter's shoulder and his daughter's arm around his waist, and he sang "The Cowboy Rides Away," the way he had sung it alone for years, in the barn on Saturday mornings with the radio on, and the horses watching and Linda somewhere in the house humming along. He sang it the way he'd always sung it. Not well, but fully, with all of himself. He thought about the surgery, 12 days away. He thought about the odds the doctor had given him, the better-than-even odds. And he thought, I am a man who has always bet on better than even, have worked land that might not give back what I put in, have loved people who might leave before I was ready, have gotten up every morning not knowing what the day would bring, and chosen to go anyway. That is what I know how to do. That is what I am. He felt, for the first time in 4 months, not fearless. Fear was still there, would probably always be there, but ready. As ready as a person can be for the uncertain things that life does not ask permission before delivering. Cassidy felt him shift beside her, felt some tension leave him that she hadn't known she'd been measuring. A tension she'd been quietly monitoring for months the way you monitor something fragile, watching for cracks. It was gone now, or at least changed into something different, something that still had weight, but sat differently in him. She recognized it as the difference between fear that paralyzes and fear that simply exists alongside you, manageable, acknowledged, no longer in charge. She tightened her arm around his waist. He kissed the top of her head, the way he'd done when she was small, and she let him. On the floor, Luke Patterson sang the chorus of The Cowboy Rides Away, with approximately 60% of the actual words and 40% of instinct and approximation. And it didn't matter at all, because the Lafitte song was large enough to hold all of that. And the voices around him filled in every gap, and the sound that rose from the floor of AT&T Stadium in those final minutes was not one voice or 45,000 voices, but something in between. Something collective and human and very nearly holy. Walt Freeman was crying. He made no attempt to hide it, no self-conscious adjustment, no clearing of the throat. He stood with his arms at his sides and tears running freely down his face, and his expression was not sadness, but gratitude. The particular gratitude that arrives when something you've loved your whole life proves, once again, that it was worth loving. Luke put a hand briefly on the older man's shoulder. Walt looked over at him, and they shared a look that required no words. The look of two people who have, in the space of a few hours, gone from strangers to something without an easy name, joined by proximity and music, and the specific alchemy of a night that will not be repeated. 32 shows, Luke said. Walt laughed through his tears. 32 shows, he confirmed. The final note held, and then resolved. For a moment, that particular moment that exists only at the end of something truly great, that breathless pause before the applause begins, the stadium was suspended in a shared breath. Then the sound came. The full sound, everything. Applause and cheering and whistling and a collective release of held feeling that went on, rolling in waves, each wave building on the one before it. George Strait stood at the center of the stage with his hat in his hand, his head bowed briefly, and then he raised it and looked out at the crowd with an expression that said, simply and completely, "Thank you." Dolly Parton stood at his right, her hand over her heart. She looked out at the crowd, and then at George, and said something to him that nobody in the stadium could hear, but that a camera caught later, and that would be shared many thousands of times in the days that followed. Leaning slightly toward him, her lips moving in the roar of the crowd, and whatever she said made him laugh. A genuine, unguarded laugh. The laugh of a man completely at ease in the best possible moment. The lights went gold. The stage filled with it. Bobby and Cassidy moved with the crowd toward the exits slowly. carried by the current of 45,000 people all in the same state. The particular dazed, tender, slightly stunned state that follows an experience that exceeded what you brought to it. Nobody was in a hurry. The mood was not the aggressive crowd push of a venue trying to empty quickly. It was something more like a shared reluctance to let the night end, a collective agreement to make the exit slow, to carry the feeling as long as possible. Bobby was quiet, but it was a different quiet than the one he'd carried for months. This one was full rather than closed. At the edge of the parking lot, where the crowd thinned and the hot Texas night opened up around them, Cassidy stopped walking. Bobby stopped with her. They stood for a moment, the noise of the stadium still audible behind them, the Texas sky above them impossibly wide and full of stars. "You okay?" Cassidy asked. Bobby looked up at the sky for a moment, then back at his daughter. "You know what I thought about during that last song?" "What?" "That your mother was right," he said. "About almost everything, but about this especially." He gestured vaguely back at the stadium. "That you have to go, that you have to actually go to the things that matter, not just think about going to them. That the distance doesn't matter, and the money doesn't matter, and whatever's in the way doesn't matter, because the thing itself, the actual night, the actual song, the actual room full of people who love the same thing you love, that's something nobody can give you except yourself." Cassidy looked at him for a long moment. She used to say that. She used to say it all the time. He settled his hat back on his head. "I should have listened better." "Daddy!" Cassidy took his arm. "You're here now." He covered her hand with his. "Yeah," he said. "I am." They walked to the truck together, the stadium lights behind them, the stars above. The 400-mile drive back to Sweetwater, waiting in the dark. Bobby opened the driver's side door, then stopped and looked back at the stadium, that steel and glass monument glowing in the Texas night. One last time. He touched the bandana in his back pocket. He thought of Linda. He thought of the surgery, and of the morning after it, and of the morning after that. Then he got in the truck. Luke Patterson sat in his car in the parking lot for 20 minutes, but this time not because he was nervous. He sat because he wasn't ready to leave yet. Because the moment the car engine came on and the podcast options appeared on the screen, the spell would break by degrees, and he wanted to hold it a little longer. This feeling of having walked into something without knowing what it was and walked out changed. He called Chris again. "How was it?" Chris asked. Luke was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You know how you always say that the best photographs are the ones that show you something you already knew, but had never seen clearly?" "Yeah, it was like that. The whole night was like that." Chris was quiet too, for a moment. Then, "Are you going to listen to country music now?" Luke looked at the stadium, still lit and enormous against the Texas night. "Yeah," he said. "I think I am." "Your dad's gonna love that." "My dad's gonna lose his mind." Chris laughed. "Come home safe, man." "I will." He sat a few more minutes after hanging up. The crowd had thinned significantly around him, headlights moving slowly through the lot in all directions. Somewhere nearby, someone was playing a George Strait song from their car speakers, the melody drifting across the warm Texas air. "The Chair," the first song he'd listened to on the drive up. Luke rolled down his window and listened until it ended. Then he started the car and drove south toward Austin, the radio on, the night open wide before him. 3 days later, a short video clip circulated across social media. Posted first by a fan in section 114, then shared and reshared until it had been seen by hundreds of thousands of people. It was 23 seconds long. It showed a wide shot of the floor crowd during Islands in the Stream, the stage visible in the background with two unmistakable figures at the microphone. And in the foreground, an ocean of faces turned upward, every mouth moving, every voice part of the same enormous sound. In the comments section, one comment accumulated more replies than any other. It said, "I was there. I will never forget it as long as I live." Below that, hundreds of others said the same thing, each in their own words, each returning to the same place. "I was there. I was there. I was there." Bobby Dean Calloway had his surgery 11 days after the concert, on a Tuesday morning, at a cardiac center in Lubbock. Cassidy was in the waiting room for 6 hours, drinking bad coffee and reading the same magazine page approximately 40 times without absorbing a single word. The surgeon came out at 4:17 in the afternoon and told her that it had gone well. Better than well, actually. The valve replacement had been clean, no complications, recovery timeline looking strong. Cassidy called the ranch foreman to let him know. She called Bobby's brother in Amarillo. She sat back down in the waiting chair and let herself shake, finally, with all the fear that had been banked and waiting for release. And she shook for a full 5 minutes, and then she stopped, and she was okay. When they let her into the recovery room, Bobby was awake and groggy, and wearing a hospital gown, and still somehow managing to look like himself, like a man who has always been grounded in the specific gravity of who he is, who cannot be made unrecognizable even by surgery and hospital light, and the particular vulnerability of lying in a bed with monitors attached. He looked at her. "Hey, sweetheart. Hey, Daddy. Did it go okay?" "It went great." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Good." He shifted carefully. "I was thinking, when I was going under, you know what I was thinking about?" "What?" He smiled, slow and true. "That last song," he said. Cassidy took his hand. Outside the hospital window, the Texas afternoon light was long and gold, the same light that had been on the parking lot in Arlington 12 days ago. The kind that makes everything it touches look like something worth keeping. "Me too," she said. Walt Freeman went home to his house in Weatherford, Texas, 43 miles from Arlington, and told his wife, Patsy Freeman, everything about the show. Sitting at the kitchen table at 1:30 in the morning with 2 glasses of sweet tea, talking until she finally said, gently, that she needed to sleep, even if he didn't. He sat up for another hour by himself. 32 shows. Whatever number came next, he'd be there. He was sure of that. Diane Holloway drove back to her hotel in Fort Worth that night and sat on the edge of the bed in the dark. And for a long time, she didn't do anything. Didn't turn on the television. Didn't check her phone. Didn't open the laptop that held her current consulting spreadsheets and half-written pitch decks and the evidence of a career she wasn't sure she still believed in. She just sat. And in the sitting, something came through that she'd been keeping out for 2 years. The simple, uncomplicated love of music. Not the industry, not the metrics, not the market demographics, or the streaming analytics. Just the music itself. The way it had felt in that stadium. 45,000 people and 2 legends and 1 perfect surprise on a hot Texas night. And every single person in the room remembering at the same moment why any of it had ever mattered. She reached for her phone, opened her music app, put in her earbuds. She searched for George Strait, started with Ace in the Hole. By the second song, she had her notebook out. By the fourth, she was writing. Not a business plan, not a pitch, not a strategic document. Just writing about what the music made her feel, and why, and what she thought it was doing when it did what it did. Writing the way she'd written in college, before the industry got into her and made everything transactional. She wrote for 2 hours. Then she slept better than she had in months. In the morning, she called Janet Pruitt. "How was it?" Janet asked. "It was everything," Diane said. "I'm going back to Nashville and I'm going to do something different. I don't know exactly what yet, but something that starts from the music and stays there." There was a pause. Then Janet said, "I bought those tickets because I thought you needed to be reminded of something." "Well," Diane said, "it worked." Luke Patterson drove back to Austin with the radio on and stopped twice. Once for gas outside of Waco, once for coffee near Temple. And both times, when he got back in the car, he turned the radio to the first country station he could find. He spent the following week asking questions, following threads, building a map. He called his father, the literature professor, and described the concert. And his father listened with the focused attention he gave to all stories, and then said, "That sounds like the experience of discovering that a tradition you didn't know you belonged to has been waiting for you the whole time." Luke told him that was exactly right. His father seemed pleased. He started a playlist. He went back to the chair, and then forward and backward from it, song by song, building a sense of the territory. He read about the history, the Bakersfield sound, the countrypolitan era, the outlaw movement, the 1990s Renaissance when George Strait and his contemporaries had held the line for a particular vision of what country music could and should be. He was not a convert in the evangelical sense. He didn't abandon the music he'd grown up with or reject the analytical framework he'd developed for thinking about it. But he added something. He added this: the direct emotional line, the clean storytelling, the particular courage of sincerity in a cultural moment that had spent decades being suspicious of it. 6 months later, he went back to a George Strait show in Houston. He wore boots this time. The night that 45,000 people sang together in Arlington, Texas, became one of those events that enters the local mythology of country music. Not because of what was recorded or broadcast, but because of what happened to the people who were there. They told the story for years. They told it to their children and their friends and strangers, who asked why they had that particular look on their face when a certain song came on the radio. The story they told was always the same story, even when the details differed. That they were there, in that room, on that night, when the music was so real and so shared that the air itself seemed to know it, and that they had been, in some way they couldn't entirely explain, changed by it. Music does this, not always, not everywhere, but sometimes in the right room, with the right people, at the right moment. Sometimes it does exactly this. Sometimes the cowboy rides away, and everyone who watches him go is better for having been there.